Good morning. It is Sunday, April the 26th, 2020. And sorry for those, I have not set my phone to be do not disturb. But I just wanted to come on here just a little bit and just share a little bit of, how I've been feeling and what I sense that maybe some others are feeling, and some of the blessings that Jesus was to his disciples after he rose from the dead, how he met them where they were and gave them what they needed. And I've been reading through the Gospels, and I finished John today. And this is from John chapter 21, but I just want to go back a little bit with John chapter 20 and mention, when Jesus died, he had told his disciples that he was going to die and that he would be raised from the dead, and they just didn't hear it. Now, it's interesting, the Pharisees remembered it. The Pharisees were the ones that remembered that Jesus said he would rise from the dead. And that's why they had Pilate set a guard and a seal on the tomb, which I find amazingly ironic. But anyway, Mary Magdalene was the first person that Jesus appeared to after he rose from the dead, a woman. And what he did for her to cause him to recognize her was he called her by her name. He said, "Mary." And then she recognized who he was. That was what she needed. She'd had a very intimate relationship with him in a way that others hadn't, in a sense, because he had delivered her from 7 demons, a life of just total bondage and torment. And she had followed him from that point on, along with his disciples, apparently, along with the 12. And she was the first person that he appeared to, and he simply called her by name. And if you watch The Chosen, they use this as a very poignant point, because he called her by name. Because when they did the videos, The Chosen, she goes by a different name when she's being tormented by the demons, and then he calls her by her real name in the time that he is delivering her. It's a wonderful, if you've not watched The Chosen, please tune in. It's amazing. So anyway, going on to when he met with Thomas. Thomas was, we give him a bad rap. I think we give him a bad name because he was just honest. He was not with the others when Jesus appeared to them, and he was the one that had said, let us go to Jerusalem and die with him, when Jesus decided to go into Jerusalem, because they were wanting to stone him there. And, Thomas was willing to go. Okay, well, let's go die with him. So anyway, he said, if I don't see the wounds in his hands and his feet and put my hand on it and the wounds in his side, I'm not going to believe. Well, Jesus appeared again to the disciples when Thomas was there, and he gave Thomas what he needed. He didn't berate him. He didn't, just go on and on. Why didn't you believe? Why didn't you believe? He just said, "Here, Thomas, put your hand in my wounds." And then Thomas was the first one to declare, "My Lord and my God." So Jesus says in that moment, he says, "Thomas, because you have seen me and have believed, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed." And that's us. We have a particular blessing because we haven't seen Jesus and yet we believe. Now, on to chapter 21. Simon, it says, after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, which is a part of the Sea of Galilee. And Simon Peter and Thomas and Nathanael and the sons of Zebedee and 2 other disciples had gone fishing. And they fished all night and caught nothing. And in the morning, Jesus was on the shore and he says, "Children, have you any meat? Have you caught any?" And they said, "No." And so he told them to cast on the right side of the boat, and there they would find a catch. Well, there were so many fish that they couldn't even drop the net. And it says that John, therefore the disciple that Jesus left, said to Peter, and I could just imagine him, he's almost saying to Peter, that's the Lord. Now, Simon Peter and John had experienced something similar to this at the very beginning. And there was something about a catch that size that was the light that turned on, and Peter recognized that's the Lord. And it says that Peter just, put on his coat and jumped in the water and just swam for shore. And, Peter and the disciples, they'd seen Jesus already, and I'm sure that Peter had known that the Lord had forgiven him for his denial. But Jesus knew that Peter needed even more. But before that, Jesus had made breakfast for them. This has always been so touching to me, that he said, come and eat breakfast. Come and dine. And he had made fish and bread for them already cooking. He knew they were hungry, he knew they were tired, and he knew they needed this. And this was just a practical expression of his great love for them. And then it says that he takes Peter aside and he says, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? Now, we know that, I knew this. My dad had pointed this out when I was a kid, that when Jesus asked Peter the first time, do you love me? He was asking him, do you agape me? And we know that agape is the strongest form of love. It is the self-sacrificing, selfless love that's talked about in 1 Corinthians 13. And Jesus asked Simon, do you agape me? And Peter was honest. He said, Lord, you know that I phileo you. You know that. I love you as the deepest, closest, dearest friend. You know that I do that. But then, Jesus accepts that, and he says, well, feed my sheep. Or feed my lambs, he said. That was the first thing. He said, feed my lambs. And then the next verse, he says to him, Simon, son of Jonah, do you agape me? He asks him again, do you agape me? And, Peter again, he's honest, and he says, yea, Lord, you know that I phileo you. You know that. You know what love I have for you. And I'm just being honest. And Jesus still gives him a commission. He says, feed my sheep. The third time, Jesus asks him, Simon, son of Jonah, do you, let me see if I get the word here. He says, do you phileo me? It's almost like, Simon, do you really phileo me even? And this is why Peter is grieved. Peter was grieved that Jesus asked him, do you phileo me? And he says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I phileo you. You know that is what I'm capable of right now. But Jesus still commissions him, and he says, feed my sheep. And then he says, verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself and walkest whither thou wouldest. But when you are old, you shall stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee where you would not. So Jesus is telling Peter, he promises, he says, right now, you have admitted and you are honest with me that you love me as a dear friend. But when you're old, I'm going to be working in your heart, and you will be willing to give your life for me. You really will. Peter had bragged to the Lord, or he had been, maybe he didn't look at it that way, but he had said, Lord, I'll die for you. I will die for you. And that's when Jesus said, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows, twice. And that must have been a big blow to him. That was what Peter wanted. He really wanted it, but he wasn't capable of it yet. And at this point, when the risen Lord comes and talks to Peter, Peter knows that the Lord knows who he really is. And he knows that he is of himself not able to give him more than he has. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about where we are right now and how some of us maybe, and this is true of me, I have been feeling rather fearful a little bit. I'm just very unsettled, and seeing the way the things are panning out, I'm saying, Lord, you know of myself, I'm not capable of, being braggadocious about anything, about my great love for you, or that I am able to do anything. But this is where I am right now, Lord. I feel kind of fearful. I feel unsettled. I am looking at things the way they are. But Jesus, I do love you. I do love you. And you know what depth that is, and you know what it is. But Lord, you promise that you are going to complete the work you began in me, and that's all I can say right now. So everybody, just be encouraged. Peter was able, as time went on, he was able to give his life for the Lord. But it wasn't because of his ability. It was because what Jesus did in his life. And we can trust that the Lord will complete what he begins in us, even now. So be blessed today and be encouraged.